We find in chapter 6, God is going to do something which has never been done before, and that's attempt to hit the reset button, as you will. Not start over from scratch, but he's going to reset the system, and he's going to give it another go here. Last time we talked about the sons of God marrying the daughters of men and the disaster that humans plunge themselves into. And now God is going to do something which has never been done before, and that's attempt to rid the world of the sin and the wickedness that had been plaguing the world for who knows how long at this point. What we're going to see is the story of Noah and the great flood that God's going to bring upon the earth to cleanse this world of wickedness. We find in chapter 6, verse 6, that it repented the Lord that he had made man. It grieved the Lord so much in his mind, he said, man, I almost wish I had never even made man. And that's where we are right now in our story. But not only are we going to see God cleaning the world of evil, we're going to see a new chapter for mankind, a new chapter for humans. God's going to hit the reset button, as you will. Not start over from scratch, but he's going to reset the system, and he's going to give it another go here. We're going to find two ideas of God's plan. The first plan we're going to see here in Genesis chapter 6 is the plan to clean up wickedness, but to continue his overall plan. And the second thing we're going to find here, many people have questions about this as well, so we're going to talk about it. So, a reduced lifespan. If you look back in Genesis chapter, let's just go back to chapter 5 and verse 28, we see that Lamech, he lived 182 years. And then we find that Lamech, in verse 30, lived 595 years. Then we find that Noah lived 500 years. Well, I am what you would call a literalist, and so where the Bible speaks literally, we take the Bible literally. Where the Bible speaks figuratively, we take the Bible as figurative. Jesus says, I am the door. Now, does he actually mean he's a door? No. But does he mean he's a spiritual door? Yes. So he's speaking in both literal and figurative methods. In the Bible here in Genesis 5, we find him speaking in literal forms, that these people were actually this old, 500 years old. How in the world does that happen? Well, the Bible must be a fairy tale, because this can't be true. And the Noah's flood must just be a story, because there's just no way that these things can actually happen. Well, the more you dig into it, the more you might begin to believe that this is actually a real thing. If you go into every culture around the world, you go down to the Aztecs and you go down to the ancient people in Mexico, they have stories about a great flood. If you go over to Asia, into Chinese culture and places around the world, you'll find that they have a story of a great earth flood. And everywhere you go, even in Islamic cultures, they have a great story of the great flood. So around the world, there's known this great story. Now, how did this happen? Well, because all humans come from the same mother and father. And they come from the same parents that passed down this story to their children. And as these children moved around the world, they took that original story with them about this great flood that killed the earth off. Reduced lifespans. Let's talk about this for a moment. How can this happen? How can this be real? How can people live to be 500 years old? Well, as science is researching ancient humans, and so scientists believe humans are millions of years old, even though scientists will tell you the only actual written evidence they have is that of humans being about 3,200 years old. That's the original writings that they say they can find. They can't find anything earlier than that, some would say. Now let's talk about animals for a moment. There's many scientists that would even say that we all come from the same species as far as evolution goes. They'll even use sharks. They'll use shark cartilage and to help humans, they'll feed humans shark cartilage because it has some good stuff that helps you grow, they would say, grow cartilage back in you. And they would say that studying other animals helps them understand even how humans grow. And they test chemicals and drugs on animals as well. That there's what they call a Greenland shark. And I'll show you this here. So it says here, if you just type in Greenland shark lifespan, it says National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration studies this. And they say that the Greenland shark can live at least 250 years old. Now, remind you that Greenland sharks are composed of the same type of things that we are. You talk about atoms and molecules. We're all species here are made up of the same type of building block material, although put together in different ways. Protons and the chemicals that make up a shark are the same type of things that make up humans. They're just arranged in different ways, right? So why can a shark live 250 years old, but we can't? They say that the shark may even live up to or over, look, watch this, 500 years. 500 years old shark. How can this possibly be? What if I told you it has everything to do with where they live and the diet of what they eat? Now, how does this matter to Genesis? Well, at the same exact time that God is going to destroy the earth with this great flood, the entire environment that man lives in is going to change. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the Bible talks about how the fountains of the deep is going to say that the fountain of the deep broke up. And so there's water under the crust of the oceans. And so when that water breaks up and comes up out of the ground, and then also says that the waters from the heavens are going to come down. So here's a theory, is that there potentially used to be a great hyperbolic chamber that this earth was, that right now we have our ozone layer, but imagine what if we had another layer on top of that also increased the amount of oxygen in our air today. The amount of oxygen, the particles in the air that we breathe is so much today. But pre-flood, pre the fountains of the deep, pre this old ozone layer falling apart at the same time and causing this great catastrophic flood, pre that, the earth was so rich and green potentially with this great thick oxygen. So when you breathe this oxygen, you can breathe so much cleaner, fresher air. The food back then wasn't as polluted with chemicals and problems as it has today. So one could say that one of the reasons man lived longer back in that day was the environment they lived at. I want to show you another article here. It's called A Hyperbolic Chamber. This is an article from the Mayo Clinic, and many people have heard of this in the U.S. even. It's the Mayo Clinic, and they study these things. And here's an overview of what a hyperbolic chamber is. Hyperbolic oxygen therapy, it says, involves breathing pure oxygen. Pure just means unmessed up oxygen, right? Well, don't we have messed up oxygen today, don't we? But they do it in a pressurized environment. So again, it has this pressure to it that really puts this clean oxygen into your system. And it helps with sickness. It helps infections. It helps wounds heal that normally wouldn't have healed because of a different sickness. So some people talk about helping with cancer and other sicknesses that they debate about. But the end of the story is they say a hyperbolic atmosphere can help many different things in your body. Some would say even helping the longevity of your lifespan. Who's to know what a person would do if they was to, have this thing and live in one every day? Now, not every day, but maybe they go and do it for a couple hours a day. I don't know. But what we can imagine is perhaps there was some kind of purely rich environment pre-flood that no longer exists after the flood that coincides with the flood of the earth. The waters of the heavens came down and the fountains of the deep came up. That's part of what could have happened. But also what we see is that God also said, no more. No more. I've let you guys live this long lifetime for long enough. And he begins to shorten the lifespan of man. Watch this in verse 3 of chapter 6. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be, talk about from now on, shall be limited to only 120 years. So you could say that it might be to where God makes it to where you can't live over 100 years, but it also may be that God set up the environment to where it's no longer capable of people living 120 years. I think I've seen somewhere that the oldest human recorded would be like 116 years old, like in China or somewhere, Taiwan, Tibet. But the idea is, who's to say that maybe that the changing of the environment that day, that year during Noah's flood, was the same time the environment changed. And now you see, if you read Genesis, that the age of man after the flood begins to decrease just steadily. And it begins to plateau down here at about 100 years. And nowadays, you live to be 96, 98, 100, you've done a pretty good job. But that's what we have to work with today. I wanted to show you these two articles and just give you some thoughts to think about. Now, I can't say I know for sure, but all I can do is trust what the Bible says. And there could be pre-flood some super high oxygen environment that was maybe more pressurized than it is today, because we do have an air pressure, right? Who's to say the air pressure then wasn't higher than it is now, right? So there's just some things to think about. So to say that man could not live 500 years, well, today they can't. Scientists are studying creatures, and there are many creatures that live 200 years. Talk about a tortoise. Different sharks, different species can live up to and over 200 years old. And many of those creatures, again, are made of the same type of material, bone structures and flesh and blood that we're made of. So why can't we? Why are we limited to the ages that we are? Imagine Hitler. What if Hitler would have been given 500 years of life and things didn't turn out the way it did? Imagine the destruction that could have happened. Imagine Einstein. Imagine if he could have lived to be 200, 300, 400 years old, and he was able to use his wisdom and multiply it through those years that he lived. Man, we would be living in a much more technological, advanced society today, that's for sure. Now, one of the reasons I believe that God limited the age of man is because he's seen what happens when you give man and what seems like unlimited lifespan. 500 years to me seems pretty unlimited. But when you begin to give man that much time, the wicked grows so fast. And then wickedness in the minds of people begins to seem untethered just over and over and grows so much more. So why would God destroy the world? And why would God shorten lives like it did, or like it says it did? Well, we can see from evidence that pre-flood, the longer man lived, the more evil that they became. We also know that God loves man. And because of his love for mankind, he's seen it best to limit the time they're here on earth, limit the access to evil that they had by the time they would spend in the evil because of the love of God. But God always gives a choice. Now watch this. God gives a choice between him or evil. You have a choice as well between God or evil. And statistically speaking, you will make the same choice as what most people make, and that's evil. Why? It's in our nature that sin nature that we have from our forefathers, to always want to choose evil, to choose wickedness. That's statistically speaking anyways. The world is in a state of devolution, not evolution. We're not growing better. This world is growing closer and closer to chaos. In chapter 6, we find here that God is going to destroy the earth. And at the same time, he's going to destroy the earth with water, not completely, but he's going to destroy it with water. He's going to save Noah, which is a righteous man. Not all his sons were necessarily good dudes, but God chose to save them because of their righteous father as well. And so we find that God is going to also at the same time create a way that mankind will be limited in their years. But I want to leave you on a positive note that in verse 8 of chapter 6, it says, "But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord." How did Noah find grace in the eyes of the Lord? Well, Noah believed God and Noah trusted God. You see, it was hard for Noah to believe something he's never seen before. When God began to speak to Noah, as you'll see here, and said, "I need you to build an ark." I don't know if he's ever seen what an ark looked like. I don't know if he was any kind of man that knew how to build a boat, but he trusted God and he began to build a boat. Now, everyone around him thought he was crazy, but Noah still trusted God. And so that's one of the reasons that God chose to save him, because he trusted God. And you may be looking at this story being like, I just can't believe it. I just can't believe that men lived, in verse 9, 90 years and begat a child. And then after he begat a child, he lived 815 years after that. So close to 900 years, some would say, on some of these guys are living. 800 years, 600 years. Wow. You could say, I don't believe that. It's just too hard to believe. I don't believe that the whole earth was flooded with water. I just don't believe that. Well, that's your choice. And that's what most of the people in our story right here, they could not believe the crazy things that God was saying. But Noah did. Noah trusted God. And I believe God's still looking for people who, even though something seems crazy, I can't do that, I can't imagine that, but they're willing to trust him. God's still looking for those people that will choose him over what's around you. In verse 11, the Bible says, "The earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, and all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, The end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth." And then God gives him the commandments. May have seemed crazy, but Noah trusted God and put other people's opinions behind Noah. Noah could have said, this is a little weird. What will people think about me? But no, Noah didn't do that. Noah trusted God with his life, and therefore God saved him. And God didn't just save him, but God saved the ones around him. My own sons may someday not believe the same truth that I do, but I'm praying that God will show them grace through me and my decisions as well. So we'll talk about the actual flood next time, but I wanted to share that with you today. Some evidence a little bit on the age of man pre-flood, and maybe some ideas of what pre-flood could have looked like. That's it. You have a great night. God bless you all. Ciao.